What's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the MMA Junkie Preview Show. I am your host, Farah Hannoun, and today we're going to take a deep dive at arguably, and I think actually maybe not so arguably, the greatest card of the year so far. We still got one to go, but UFC 322 headlined by a welterweight title fight between champion Della Maddalena, who takes on Makhachev, who vacated his lightweight title for a move up to 170, move up to chase greatness. And the co-main event, we've got, a lot of people are calling it the greatest fight in women's MMA history. We'll speak to Danny Segura, who's going to help me dive into all things UFC 322, get his opinion on if he thinks this is the greatest fight in women's MMA history. It's arguable, but obviously we've got Valentina, Shevchenko, and Zhang, Weili, an amazing fight, and a plethora of pivotal welterweight clashes. Just a lot of great fights on the card, big names, all that good stuff. So Danny is going to help me break all these things down. What's up, Danny? How's it going?
Hello, how are you? I'm doing well.
I mean, I just called this the best card of the year. I think that's fair, right?
Yeah, 100%. By far is the best card of the year.
Yeah, I mean, that main card is incredible and some interesting ones. On the prelims, I do want to start out with this because this was a kind of a topic. Dano's asked about it. Daniel Cormier told Georgian Goes that he thinks Valentina and Zhang Weili is kind of the best and the biggest fight in women's MMA history. Obviously, we had Amanda and Chris Cyborg. There are others to mention. What do you think?
For me, Amanda and Chris Cyborg is probably number one. And there are others up there. And I think this is probably a good second, maybe third. I would really have to give it more thought into the fights that we've seen historically in women's MMA, but it's probably second. I would say people forget that Amanda Nunes versus Chris Cyborg was a huge deal. Just the fact of getting Chris Cyborg over to the UFC. Chris Cyborg is easily the greatest ever at 145 pounds. Amanda Nunes at the time, even though she kept on building to her resume, after the fight, she was also considered an all-time great, if not the greatest of all time. So it was a big deal. This is a big deal, but it's still not at that level. But still, second greatest fight ever in the history of women's MMA. That's still pretty damn significant, right?
But where's the buzz, right? I think this is the issue I'm having. I don't know if it's because UFC 322 is so stacked, but I remember there was definitely a lot more buzz with Amanda and Chris Cyborg. But I'm kind of surprised that we're talking about this potentially being either number one or number two greatest female fights in UFC history. It just doesn't really feel like that. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's just because it's being overshadowed by such a great card? I mean, I know Chael is always going to have his crazy takes, but he's saying, he always says the blame is to put on the fighters for not promoting the fight or whatnot. But this kind of fight should sell itself, right, based off of their accolades and stuff. But I'm just not feeling the buzz. Maybe when they make the walk, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would dare to say for the whole card, I mean, we're talking about the best card of the entire year, and it's not like a super crazy thing, but I just think that's more about where we're at with the UFC. I feel like the UFC has lost excitement among the fan base. MMA is not as hot as it once was. In years prior, there was an excitement. People are really involved. I feel like, people just tune in and out every week and there's cards. It's kind of just like a given. And overall, the sport has lost a lot of excitement this year. So I think it's more to blame around that rather than the contestants or what's happening around the contestants with the card at 322. So, yeah, I would say that it's just a general lack of excitement for the sport is affecting every single fight.
What do you think that's due to? Like, is it because we've lost those massive stars that we had, the Connors, the John? Well, lost and not lost, but you know what I'm saying. Or what do you think? Is it more than that?
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of things. One, we did lose a lot of the names that would draw the casuals, right, like the superstars, and two, like, I don't know. I feel like the UFC has kind of just not really. I know they're the promoters, but promoters, like being a promoter, almost indicate that you have competition, right? Like you promote. The UFC no longer really promotes. It's kind of become like any really sporting league, right? Like say like Monday Night Football or whatever, or if we're talking about soccer, right? Like there's always La Liga fixtures, and we know that every year there's going to be games these dates, and it's just a thing that whether you tune in or not. But yeah, the UFC doesn't really go out of their way to really like go out and hype up a fight. It's just, look, this is what there is. And since there are no other players in the market, they don't really have the need to really like pump up their cards and make a big deal out of them. So I think there's that. And yeah, again, just the lack of superstars has put a damper overall in the sport.
Well, I think it's fair. I understand what you're saying, and I think it's fair to say that Islam Makhachev is probably one of the bigger stars that we have right now. Maybe because his dance partner, Jack Della Maddalena, a lot of people keep talking about. I mean, he just became champion, and obviously he doesn't have the name. I'm sure if he had a bigger name, then maybe, the buzz surrounding the entire card. For diehards, for sure, there's no debate that this card is incredible, but I'm talking beyond the diehard fan base. Maybe it has to do with Jack Della Maddalena still, building his own star. But nonetheless, a lot of people feel like Jack Della Maddalena is being underestimated. But it seems like most pundits and fellow fighters and stuff seem to be picking Jack. Odds say otherwise. But what do you make of just the fight in general in that regard of the notion that Jack's being underestimated, but then odds-wise, but then you have a lot of pundits and fighters that are picking Jack?
Yeah, I mean, he should. I know he's a champion, but rightfully so, he should be the underdog because he just hasn't done nearly as much compared to Islam Makhachev. Islam is an established force already and a pound-for-pound great. If not number one, number two, which is either or, is a pretty damn good spot to be in. Whereas Jack is just kind of starting to build his legacy, right? He set up the base, which was getting to a title fight. He won the belt. And from here on, that's when he really... The most of the work that he puts on is going to matter the most in terms of becoming relevant in this sport. Not that he's a champion, but I'm saying in terms of furthering his legacy and really becoming a legend or something more. So yeah, I think there's that. I see a lot of people picking, not so much fighters. I don't know, maybe I've missed out on some of the headlines, but people that analyze the sport better specifically pick Jack. And that's just because there's so much value. Like, Jack definitely has a chance to beat Islam Makhachev. We saw what he did against Bilal Muhammad, and that should tell you that there's something there to at least give a tough fight with to Makhachev. But the lines having him at like a plus, more than plus 200, that indicates that that's not the case. So either way, it's going to be a tough fight, I think people think. And if the odds makers are telling you that it's not, then, that's where the value lies. But all in all, like if it's a 50-50, odds aside, I don't see why anyone would go with Jack at this point. Not because he's not a great fighter, but Makhachev just has given us more and has proven more at this point. And we know we're getting a really, really good product here. It's going to be hard for anyone to surpass Makhachev at this point in time.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think based off of what is, some fighters have actually flip-flopped. Like we had Michael Bisping change to Islam last second. I think this fight week, I don't know if people haven't really like done the research before because there are a lot of like, whether fighters, pundits or whatnot, they're doing their picks like 2-3 months out. But I think fight week, I've seen a lot more, I don't want to say money in terms of the betting line, but more people picking Islam. But yeah, I think it's fair for him to be like the expectations are higher on him. There's always the question of who's got more pressure. I personally think it's Islam for sure. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the whole card is built around him. He is the face of the event. He is the A side. How many times have we, spoken to, Daniel Cormier or people that have trained with him, Javier Mendez? I know you spoke to him as well. And, there's tales and mythical stories that this guy can, beat up light heavyweights in training camp and this and that. And this has been a long time in the making. Also, I feel like not obviously Khabib and Islam are their own two separate people, but in a way it's almost like the continuation. And we never got to see Khabib at 170. So it even feels like this is more of a long time coming because again, of what I mentioned, Islam sort of being that continuation of Khabib's legacy. So yeah, a lot riding on him. I mean, he's potentially fighting for the belt for the belt welterweight, obviously, legacy, and being the best pound for pound fighter on the planet right now. I believe Ilia Topuria is number one, at least according to the UFC rankings. But if he wins, there's no doubt in my mind he would take that spot. So yeah, tons of pressure on Islam Makhachev. But from what I've seen all throughout fight week, he seems as cool as ever.
How much do you think this would impact his legacy? Obviously, he broke the lightweight record for most title defenses. I felt like, I've reiterated this like every kind of show I do, that I just would love a champion to just stay in their division and dominate. I know the weight cuts get hard, but it just seemed like Islam Makhachev could have reigned over that division even prior to Topuria making the move up. But now we see him move to 170, and he's probably thinking, I'm going to stay there. So how much do you think this impacts his legacy if he loses?
If he loses, I don't think it takes away much, to be honest. But if he wins, he gains a lot. I don't know if that makes sense. If he loses, like, there's always the whole thing that it wasn't his weight class, another division, right? It's like Volkanovski moving up to 155. He lost twice, one by decision, one by knockout. And are we really holding that against him? Like, he's still a great. We still consider him the greatest of all time, or at least some people, at 145 pounds. Certainly, I think at this point he has done enough to surpass Jose Aldo. So, he will still be seen probably as the greatest lightweight ever, honestly, just by breaking the record and the things that he's done. So I don't think it'll impact him too much, but what he could possibly gain here, I mean, he's already, a great, but really becoming a welterweight champion, he'll become an all-time great. Like, we're talking about him being in the top 10 in the conversations among, Anderson Silva, Demetrius Johnson, sort of that spot away from number 1 and 2, which is usually between George St. Pierre and John Jones, obviously depending on who you ask. But sort of the guys that come behind, I think Islam would be part of that group.
But he's talking about not going back to 55. Like, he didn't say that definitively, and Javier Mendez didn't want to say that definitively. They all seem to be thinking like maybe he could go back. But if he's, saying that he's most likely going to stick at 170, like, where does he go from there if he loses to Jack Della? I don't see him as the type of guy that's going to have to climb a so-called ladder, but then again, he hasn't done anything at 170. This is what I mean, like, in terms of where do you feel? Because with Volk and the examples used before, like, they're going back to the original weight. Like with Adesanya, light heavyweight didn't work, went back to middleweight. Volk, same thing. But with Islam, like, the way they're talking and how comfortable he feels now with not having to do the weight cut, you see a world, if he loses, that he goes back to 55. If he stays at 170, what does his future look like?
I honestly think that a lot of that is probably a little bit of public negotiation, right? Like, you throw certain things out there in the UFC. We obviously know the biggest fight you can possibly make right now in the sport is Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev, right? Islam first has to win, and then we got to figure out the weight class, right? Does Ilia go up to 170, or does Islam drop back down to try to get his belt back? I would think, knowing how the UFC works and how they're stripping champions and all that, they would rather see Islam drop than have Ilia go for a third title and move up another division. So with that in mind, if you're already putting out there like, hey, it takes a lot for my body to make 155, and I'm not going to do it again, and this and that, and all of a sudden the promotion has an incentive for you to be in that weight class, they got to make it worth your while, right? So yeah. I think that's a little bit of public negotiation. Islam never missed weight at 155. He didn't have the same issues on the scale that Khabib did. Khabib was literally hospitalized, in one of the makings for the fight against Tony Ferguson, right? And we've saw, like, there's also questions about some of his weigh-ins as well with the scale, how quick some of the commissioners work there in Abu Dhabi. But Islam, he doesn't look like he makes 155 easy, but he also hasn't struggled the ways Khabib and others have when making 155. So I think a lot of that, again, is negotiation. But, man, his options, just like the way, if he wins on Saturday, like, he's going to have at least 5 or 6 like lucrative options, from a fight with Kamaru Usman, from a fight to any of the winners here at UFC 322 against maybe Shafkat, maybe a return against Ilia Topuria. I mean, the possibilities are endless, and he'll be really holding a good deck of hands and a good deck of cards in his hand for his next move. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens, but it's certainly interesting. If he wins, I think the sport gets a lot interesting, a lot more.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, I agree, and I think a loss. That's where I'm kind of like wondering, because a loss like 170 has a lot of killers that don't necessarily have the biggest names. So a Sean Brady is a tough fight, but it's not like a massive name. You know what I mean? Like 170 has a lot of those guys, whereas when he was still at 55, there was the Armin fight that fell through. There was the Topuria fight that
Right.
people
Yeah.
were talking about. So it's an interesting spot, but I do agree that with a win, like, a lot of options open up. But let's look at the other side of the coin. Jack Della Maddalena. I mean, let's see, according to BetMGM, he is a plus 240 underdog, and Makhachev is a minus 300 favorite. Do you think that's fair? I mean, I expected Islam to be the favorite, but maybe a little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when the lines originally opened, if I'm not mistaken, Islam was like a minus 100 something, which that to me makes sense. I'll even take minus 200 for Islam Makhachev. I do think he is obviously the more proven product. He should win tonight. However, Jack does have a chance. And the lines, the way they're currently set up, it doesn't reflect that. So if you think this guy has a chance and the lines are giving you money, basically telling you that they're not, I mean, as a bettor, most people are going to go Jack Della Maddalena, or at least sprinkle a little bit just because of the value there. So that's the comments that I've seen. But in terms of who should be the favorite, who is more likely to win the bout, Islam should win tonight, and that's why he's the favorite. A lot of that has been manipulated again by all the money that's come in on Islam on the earlier days. So, in order to balance their losses, because the house never loses, those lines end up getting a shift.
Yeah, and it's definitely not as simple as a striker versus grappler. But if you're Islam Makhachev, and I know Islam's striking is very good, I know he knocked out Alexander Volkanovski and he stood toe to toe with him in the first fight, but it just seems like a grapple heavy approach is the way to go. And I know Jack's a great scrambler and he has a tendency to keep getting back up, but we have seen him getting taken down multiple times. Like we saw Bessel Hafez taken down numerous times, and Makhachev, like you talk about his grappling ability, his submission ability, it just seems that the wise thing to do would be go for a really heavy grapple approach. And I'd like to think, I don't know, because people talk about his cardio. It seems like some people think that Islam won't have the gas tank to continuously take Jack down, because obviously it's a lot harder when someone has resistance. I look back at the Dricus and Hamzat fight, and people were like, look, Hamzat's cardio was great, but then it's like Dricus didn't give too much resistance. He was just afraid of getting his neck caught. He wasn't working on getting back up. He wasn't taking any risks. He just kind of had his head tucked in and just didn't want to get choked or mauled. But in this, I don't see Jack being like that. But do you feel like Islam has the cardio to deal with a guy who's just going to keep working his way back up or be hard to hold down?
Yeah, I think so. We've never really seen him like super exhausted in a fight.
Maybe
the dude's a cardio machine. The dude's a workhorse. Sorry?
Maybe the first Volk fight, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. But yeah, no, I don't think that's going to be a problem here. I think on that end, he should be able to hang. I think the real question here is the size, right? Like we saw the weigh-ins. I know Islam, has said he's gotten bigger. His training partners have said he's gotten bigger, but I saw the weigh-ins and he didn't look much bigger. He didn't look noticeably different, right? Volk said the same thing when he went up to 155. He looked the same. I think it's just the thing people say, right? Like you also got to watch out with that. Just because it's said, just because it's on a headline somewhere, that doesn't mean it's true. Again, and which backs up my theory on him being able to make 155 again, and that just being sort of a public negotiation to it. But I think the biggest thing, like going back to the point that I was trying to make, is the size, right? Like how many effective takedowns can you land, right? Like, are you gonna fail on a lot of them and kind of just end up pressing him against the cage and do these things that don't really count towards point? And meanwhile, you have Jack landing a few nice jabs or a few shots, more meaningful shots, and then end up taking the round due to damage and effective striking. Could that be the case, right? We also know Jack trains with Craig Jones, who's an excellent grappler as well, and Islam wasn't able to submit Volkanovski. So is that going to be in play as well? Like, I think the size is the biggest question here.
And this debate about damage and control, because I remember watching that fight in Abu Dhabi between Volkov and Almeida, and I don't know if people are just hating on Almeida. I'm gonna need to watch it again. I haven't since then, but I remember being pretty shocked that they gave it to Volkov. Like, I
Yeah,
get it.
same.
Yeah, I get it. Almeida's boring. I get it. Like, he wasn't working. But how in God's name do you give that fight to Volkov? Like, for me, that's my robbery of the year. Again, I'm gonna have to revisit and watch. But
I
I was
agree with you.
like, I was flabbergasted. And then I saw a lot of people's opinions like, no, Volkov won. And it's like, no, you just hate Almeida. I don't, do you really think that Volkov won? So it's an interesting thing to think about how judging is working. It's kind of scary in a way because it's like Volkov didn't really do crazy damage. He had reversed him in round one.
Yeah.
But what are you looking at that I'm missing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I know this is obviously a UFC 322 preview, not UFC Abu
Yeah,
Dhabi,
yeah.
but or UFC 321 or whatever. But just real quick on that, I looked back at the stats, and it all came down to the third round, right? Like we all knew, the first Volkov won it, the second Jonathan won it, and it came down to the third. Volkov landed 2 more significant strikes that round than Jailton Almeida, 2 more. And Jailton had like 3 minutes and like 42 seconds of control time or something like that. So you're really gonna give 2 more shots that didn't wobble or rock or
Yeah.
make Almeida bleed. Just 2 more shots that were clean, be equivalent to almost literally like 85% of the round being in control. That to me is ridiculous as well. I'm with you. That's robbery of the year. But anyway, yeah, it is kind of scary how I
Yeah.
feel like judging used to be very centered and used to favored a lot of the wrestlers, right? There was that whole thing back in the day of like, oh, you get a takedown in the last 10 seconds to steal the round, and that's kind of still stuck around a little bit to this day. But I feel like obviously that isn't the answer because a takedown, in 10 seconds of control time doesn't do shit. But I feel like we've steered way too away from that, and now we overcorrected, and now strikers get like all this leeway where almost like wrestling doesn't matter, right? Control doesn't matter, and all these things are part of the sport. So yeah, it is quite scary. And if you're Islam, you would think that'd be against you.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up because I'm thinking like Jack is scrappy and he's a very good scrambler and stuff, but you can't ignore control time. I don't care. Like, it's not always easy to work. Like, it depends on the guy on bottom. Like, sometimes they'll be holding on. Like, Hamza got a lot of criticism, but again, it's the point that I made. Like, Dricus was playing it safe. He wasn't taking any risks. He wasn't trying to scramble out. He wasn't trying to like get out. Like, he was just tucking his neck and not to get choked. So it's kind of hard to work when you've got that situation. Not that there was any debate in Hamzat's win over Dricus, but you get what I'm saying. Like, here, but with Jack, like, do you think in a way, like, his scramble a bit, like, obviously Islam has some really good chokes. He's got a good Darce choke. He's got a good head and arm choke. Basically, what I'm getting at is, do you see Islam submitting him, or do you feel like this fight goes the distance?
I mean, Islam can submit anybody. I really do think so. I mean, if you look at his fights, I was looking at his record, and for whatever reason, I don't know if that first Volkanovski fight just kind of really expanded in my mind, and I just kind of felt like he had won a bunch of decisions. But then looking back,
8 of 9, he's finished.
yeah, no, looking back, his record is ridiculous. His last side of defense, submission, finish. The one before that, submission, finish. The one before that, knockout. The one decision. The one before that, decision. Then submission. Then knockout. Then submission. Then submission. Like, he really, in his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fights, he's only gone to decision once. So can he either knock out or submit Jack? Yes, of course. He's been doing it for the past 5 years against, some of the world's best, at a high level. So yeah, I think that's definitely in the cards. But again, I'm really curious about the size, because I do think as you go up in weight class and you lose that advantage in strength, you lose that advantage in power and punching power, given that the bigger opponents are able to endure more damage, your finishing rate should drop, right? And I probably expect that to be a case here, which is why I think this fight is going to go the distance, even though, Makhachev has a bunch of finishes.
Do you see Makhachev by decision? I don't know. I feel Jack's scrambling is going to give Islam opportunity, because they talk about the folk style wrestling, right? You got to give up your back when you get up, and when you're going up against guys like Islam, that's what all he needs. It's not necessarily like he doesn't need a traditional double leg and side control and all that stuff. Like you get up, you leave your neck out. You know, he could take your. I could see scenarios, and again, we look at the Bilal fight, and I just feel that, yeah, okay, Jack can defend takedowns well. I don't want to take anything away from Jack's win, but Bilal just attacked the takedowns too late. You're sweaty in there. It's a lot harder. Like Jack's got his timing figured out. Like if you're gonna implement a wrestling game plan later on, it's just gonna make it a lot easier for Jack to stuff your takedowns and you're slippery and all that. Whereas with Islam, I feel if he's gonna be aggressive with the wrestling early, it's hard for me to ignore Jack's past fights and me seeing him getting taken down. I'm gonna have to pull up the individual stats for every single one of his fights and how much he's gotten taken down. I don't care how many takedowns he's defended. You're talking about Islam Makhachev here and his level of grappling, and that's exactly what I said before Hamzat and Dricus. I said I can't help but look at Dricus's past fights. I can't ignore when he was taken down by Derek Brunson. Like I can't ignore those things. You know what I mean? So this is where I'm thinking. And in terms of the striking, yeah, I don't know. If you're Islam, I just don't like mock Hamzat all you want. I felt like he fought Dricus perfectly, and I think Islam needs to do the same against Jack.
Hey, just to beat my own drum a little bit, we did a preview for that card, remember? And I told you it was gonna be Hamza Chimaev by decision, and everybody thought I was insane, and that was like a crazy number. I think it was like plus like 500 or something.
Right.
Yeah. It's going to be tough submitting Jack, I think. I know you talk about his scrambling, but look, he trains with Craig Jones. He's experienced. He's very calm. I mean, he's a guy that doesn't really make any rookie mistakes. He's always cool under fire. And I think in a way they're going to have a little bit of a conservative game plan, or at least that's what I would do if I were his coach. We talk about the judging, right? Like if he can land strikes on the bottom, or if he can just do a little bit better than Islam on the feet, and then if he gets taken down, just neutralize the damage, have no damage, just control time. Could he take a controversial decision, or controversial maybe on our eyes that we prioritize, or give a little bit more credit to the grappling? Yeah, I can totally see that happening. So why risk it by scrambling and trying to get up on your, back on your feet, when control is literally one of the least things that are given value in this new scoring criteria. So if I were him, do as much damage as you possibly can. Make sure you bust them up on the feet, and on the ground, try to avoid getting beat up.
Yeah, because look, Burns went 7 of 11 takedowns. Like you read the stat and you go like he had a lot of success, but 5 minutes of control time when you're going 7 of 11 is not a lot of time for Gilbert Burns. You know what I mean? So yeah. Jack does have a very good ability of getting back up and not getting controlled. And then with Bilal Muhammad, it was 3 of 9 takedowns for Bilal, but only 3 minutes of control. I'd like to see the Bassel Hafiz fight, although I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. That was a couple years ago, short notice, probably didn't know too much about Bassel. 3 of 20 takedowns for Bassel and 6 minutes and 48 seconds of control time. Yeah, so the Jack is definitely being rewarded for damage over control. The Gilbert Burns fight, it looks like he was en route to losing before that.
Yeah, I thought he was going to lose.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And this was 5 rounds, and he obviously fought pretty flawlessly against Bilal for 5 rounds. That all those questions that people may have had about his cardio, Jack looked fantastic. Like he didn't it's a lot of work to scramble, and he seems to have the cardio and the gas tank to do it for the full 25. But I don't know, I just feel that Islam, like if I'm an Islam fan, if I'm putting money on Islam, if I'm rooting for him, I just don't want to see him stand on the feet for too long with Jack. Like Jack's very methodical. He goes to the body. He's a dangerous guy. He's very patient. He presses forward. Very technical, very tight with his combinations. I know Islam can strike, and it would be nice to be pleasantly surprised by him and see him. I'm not underestimating striking skills, but I just feel the game plan here for him is he's just got to press him on the cage and just really aggressively push for the takedowns.
Yeah. And I wouldn't, if I were an Islam fan, like I wouldn't worry about him doing something ill-advised and just doing striking like Bilal. Like the guy is a winner. The guy will do anything to win. And if that means wrestling for 25 minutes, that's exactly what he will do. He really doesn't care too much about the fan base. These guys that come from those regions that are so far removed from like social media and like just like social media culture, like they don't care. They want to get a win. They want to get a paycheck. They want to stay undefeated. improve their legacy. And that's that. So, I wouldn't be too worried about that. What Bilal did was completely ridiculous. And to this day, I think it's like one of the biggest mistakes ever done in a title fight, because I really did think he could win. In fact, I believe I picked him to win. But yeah, that's not going to be the case with Islam Makhachev.
So what are we looking at? Islam by decision, 48-47.
Decision, lock
48.
that up.
Yeah, 48-47, 48-47, 49-46.
249-46, 148-47. How about that?
Okay, I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go 48-47, 48-47, 49-46. I don't know if there's like individual odds for that, but I just feel because of the criteria we've been talking about, the damage versus control, I feel like there will be some tough rounds to score in rounds that people could disagree on based off of what Jack does on the feet, especially that if he's going to be hard to keep down. But I don't know. I feel like, I don't know, there's pressure on Islam to win for sure, but I also feel like there's pressure on him to have a pretty like definitive performance. And that's not to take away from Jack, but that's just because of how good Islam is. Like Volkanovski's proven like he's going to go down as one of the greatest of all time. So I think looking back for Islam, the fact that he had a close fight with him in the beginning and then he ended up knocking him out in the second fight, pretty close chapter there. But with Jack, like Jack isn't proven yet, and it kind of sucks how it works, right? Because if he beats him definitively, everyone's just going to be like, Jack was not that good.
I don't know. I mean, personally,
look at his resume. He hasn't really done much. Like, I think that's fair, right? Like, look at who he's beaten. He hasn't gone through kind of the gauntlet of the other 70-pounders. Like, Shavkat had a bit of a like snap back at him where he's like, remember, you got your title shot because I was injured and you were coming off of a layoff as well. I mean, you look at it, it's a split decision over Kevin Holland, a come from behind win over Gilbert Burns. Of course, we were going to think he was going to lose to Bilal after Bilal being on that win streak. You know what I mean? I'm not saying he's not good. I'm just saying the unfortunate nature of how the sport works, that if Islam goes out there and makes it look easy, I don't think he's going to get the credit he deserves, because we're just going to look back and be like, yeah, well, what did Jack Della do?
I feel like, and maybe you might be right. We'll find out. Right. But I guess my counter argument to that is, I feel like a lot of the fan base gets really emotional and they're fanatics, right? Like they're fans. And when that happens, a lot of the time is with fighters that they don't like. You can't wait for them to lose, and then they go, oh, see, he wasn't that good. And I feel like, for example, we saw it with Leon Edwards, right? He wasn't a very liked champion. But I feel like with Jack, like people like Jack. Like, he's got a fan base. I don't know. If he loses, I don't know if people will give him too much shit for it, to be honest.
No, I'm not saying they'll give Jack shit. I think they'll just take away from Islam's win. We'll see.
Maybe we'll see. Yeah, I mean, winning another title like in a different weight class after your,
But they did that a little bit with Ilya a little bit when he knocked out Charles. Like, it's still impressive.
Yeah, that's true. But Ilya also didn't have the same, reign. He also didn't beat the guy, right? He didn't beat the champion. It was a vacant title fight. I get what you're saying. I just don't. I don't know.
I wouldn't do it. I think Jack's great. Right. Well, I'm just saying, like.
Yeah. Are you a Jack hater? That's kind of what we're.
No. I'm just saying that's what's going to happen. I said Jack is very good. I wouldn't. Yeah. No, I actually think. No, I think. Yeah. No, I just think it's actually a tough spot for Islam, because I think Jack's a lot better than his resume or his accolades show. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying if he beats him, that's what people are going to say. Like, well, Jack hasn't really done much. Like, he's supposed to win. That's what I'm saying. But it's tougher. It's an actual way tougher fight than at least the odds are giving it credit.
It is 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so your final pick is Islam by decision?
Yep.
I'm going to be a little bit bolder. I'm going to go Islam by submission.
That's fair as well.
Yeah. Round three.
Round three. I think at least it passes 2 rounds and maybe even a third. Like we're going to see a fight for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, can't wait for that one. Let's talk a little bit about the co-main event between Zhang Weili and Valentina Shevchenko. We talked about it being one of the greatest fights in women's MMA history. Perfect timing for Zhang Weili to move up, right? I feel like after that Tatiana Suarez win, I think a lot of people kind of understood like what else, especially that Rose had left the division. I just don't really feel like there's anything crazy exciting left for her to do. I actually think now was the perfect time for her to move up. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, who else was there to fight after Tatiana, right? Like maybe Mackenzie Dern, Verna, right? She was the most deserving fighter at the time. I think if there wasn't a vacant title fight, she would have gotten the next title shot. But how much is that gonna like? Are we gonna look at Zhang Weili much differently with another win, with another title defense, especially over someone like Verna? And I want to be respectful. Not that Verna is not a good fighter; she obviously is, but she obviously doesn't have. The same type of legacy or the same type of reverence that we look at her compared to Valentina Shevchenko, right? So yeah, this is the perfect time. Also, this fight has somewhat been talked about for some years now. You're also catching Valentina in a vulnerable spot a little bit, right? Like the last few years have been kind of rocky. She hasn't been as dominant as she's been in previous years. So yeah, this is the perfect moment. No more title defenses that are like super exciting for you at 115, and then you still gotta go at 125 pounds waiting for you. So yeah, this is it. This is perfect career timing right here for Zhang Weili.
Where does that put her if she can beat Valentina Shevchenko and win a second belt? Where does that put her in terms of the all-time greats in women's MMA?
Yeah, that's a good one. Definitely not number one. I'll tell you that. Like, I honestly think, and again, I'm trying to be like as even just introspectively, I try to be as unbiased as possible and recognize like whether I am a hater or not, right? Because I feel like everyone's always a little bit of a hater. Maybe I recognize it. Maybe I'm a Zhang Weili hater. Maybe, but I just don't see the allure too much about Zhang Weili, to be honest. And people talk about her like with this reverence, but I'm like, she's not an Amanda Nunes. She's not a Chris Cyborg. She's not a Valentina Shevchenko. At least that's not the feel that I get. And yet you get, people that I, respect in this community, like John Anik, UFC commentator, saying that undoubtedly if Zhang Weili were to win on Saturday, she becomes the women's MMA GOAT, right? And it's like, what? Like, what are we talking about here? And I feel like a lot of people are on the same boat. For years, everyone's been talking about Zhang Weili and superstar in China and this dominant force. And I'm like, I saw her get dominated in a decision, or not dominated, but I saw her get beat by Rose Namajunas and then knocked out by Rose Namajunas. And then I've seen some other fights that have been like, like, am I missing something here? Like, I generally don't think she's in the conversation right now to be the greatest of all time in women's MMA. And I also don't see her like as this superstar, super popular figure. Like, where are the numbers? Like, I don't see them. A lot was made of China, but like, I don't even see China really being, and maybe I'm so far removed from that, but I don't know. Even like, for example, like I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. Some of the analytics at MMA Junkie, like we see some of these Russian fighters, like random fighters, like come through Contender Series, and then we see like a scrum just completely take off in numbers, and the comments are all like, from that part of the region and stuff. Like, I don't really see that with Weili, like, and it's, again, I want to reserve some room for being wrong because, again, I'm not Chinese. I don't consume Chinese media, but I just, again, I don't want to downplay her. She seems very sweet. She's obviously achieved a lot in the sport, but I don't think she's this greatest of all time as everybody makes her out to be. Am I missing something? Am I hating? You can just tell me.
You just accused me of being a Jack hater, but it turns out the reality is right.
Maybe
here.
Look, and I'll own up to it if that's the case. But
I'm not a Jack hater. It's just Danny's a Zhang Weili hater.
No, but I don't know.
No, but I kind of understand what you're saying, like in terms of like she's definitely great, but when you've got Amanda
very good
Nunes,
fighter,
yeah, I understand. I wouldn't go as far as putting her as the GOAT. But it goes back to what we're seeing the sport come down to, the whole double champ thing. It just seems like we define GOAT a lot differently than we would have before. For me, the title defenses still hold weight. I understand the argument of when you're taking on the next guy in line, it's not always the best guy. And I think DJ is the most one that suffered from that because people will criticize his resume, but he's still in the Mount Rushmore of a lot of people's Mount Rushmores, right? So it's like now it's a little bit different. Nobody's staying and continuously taking on the next girl or the next guy. It's more like the double champ stuff, but which is kind of why I guess the UFC has been forcing fighters to drop their belts because they just don't want to see them hold up divisions. But yeah, I mean, beating Valentina would be impressive nonetheless. I know we saw Alexa Grasso do it recently, and Valentina closed out the trilogy. But I guess the fashion, let's put it this way, the fashion in which she beats Valentina. I think if she goes out there and like knocks her out or does something spectacular, like we saw Nunes do with Cyborg.
Again, I'm sounding like a hater, and that's cool if I am. Like, you know, again, I'm trying to be as non-biased as and not that I have anything against Zhang Weili personally. She seems awesome, but
did
I
she
don't think
decline
there's
an interview or something, Danny?
I don't think there's no. I don't think there's, in my opinion, I don't think there's anything she can do tonight that will surpass Amanda Nunes' resume. Nothing. Could she get a spectacular knockout and then go on to defend the title 6 times, 5 times? I don't know. And then all of a sudden we're having that conversation with Amanda Nunes. Okay, fine. But as of just tonight, could she do something to surpass Amanda Nunes as the greatest of all time in women's MMA? No, she can't.
Okay, no, that I agree with that. I agree with that. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, it's beating Valentina Shevchenko would be super impressive. And I feel like she still has a couple of years left in the sport. I don't think she's spoken about walking away, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I just think the skins on Amanda's wall are definitely, you can't argue with those.
Amanda is the greatest of all time, and it's going to be tough to surpass that resume. Could Zhang Weili do it one day? Yes. And would knocking out or doing something very impressive against Valentina go a long way for that? Sure, yeah. But there's still a lot of work to be done. It's not done and finished this Saturday.
Well, let's talk about the stylistic matchup itself. Again, I'm going to go back to me not being able to ignore what I've seen in the past. Fighters change. They get stronger. She's moving up a weight class. But if Rose Namajunas was able to take down Zhang Weili, I just don't see how Valentina couldn't do the same. I don't know. I'm going Valentina decision. I think she out-grapples her. How about you?
I'm going Valentina decision as well. Imagine if I went Weili after that, right? No, look, I'm going to go Valentina decision. I do think it's going to be competitive, but we've seen Valentina really revert to her grappling in her last few fights, because in the striking realm, women's MMA used to be pretty bad in terms of striking. Like, go back and watch some of those Miesha Tate fights in a championship level, like, you know, arm punches, not really putting the shoulder behind it. But in the last few years, like, we really have seen the striking level more than any other area in women's MMA really improve, right? You see it with Alexa, you see it with so many fighters, right? And that used to be a big weapon for Valentina. The jiu-jitsu and grappling was sort of the same, maybe a little better than the other girls, but the striking was so much better. And I feel like the gap has closed on that. Like, now girls are able to, you know, exchange with Valentina. So now she's forced to mix things up, and she does have a very good wrestling base, really good jiu-jitsu. So I expect that to be used on Saturday, especially because she's the bigger fighter. So I expect her to use her wrestling and put in her size behind it. So yeah, a decision. I don't think she submits Zhang Weili. I don't think she knocks out Zhang Weili, although that's in the cards. But you know, we haven't seen Valentina's power in a while. I think this is going to be a tough competitive fight, and it's going to end up 48-47 but for Valentina.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going Valentina by decision. I do think Zhang Weili may have a power advantage as well in the striking. So I'm So I think Valentina's route to victory is the grappling. Let's talk about a couple of other matches, because we're running out of time, because you took up so much time hating on Zhang Weili that we don't have time to talk about the other fights. But Sean Brady, Michael Morales, big welterweight fight. I love Sean Brady's mentality, but it kind of scares me and makes me think of Corey Sandhagen and how he's like, all right, I'll fight Umar. He ends up losing. His title shot goes away. But hey, he got it back just because Merab's been running through everybody. That's why he ended up getting the title shot. It's literally because of that. But that mentality sometimes can hurt you. I respect it. I love it. Fighters fight. But I just felt like Sean Brady's dominance over Leon Edwards, and then going from that to a tough, dangerous, undefeated, massive Michael Morales, just a big of size difference. It's a very risky fight for Sean Brady. What do you think?
Yeah, first of all, shout out to Sean Brady. Massive respect for taking this fight. And from what I've heard from multiple people, like, I'd heard way before the fight got even reported, and that was in the making. I had heard from people that was the plan. November, Sean Brady versus Michael Morales. But I kept always trying to get updates with sources about what was going on, if that fight was going to happen. And at one point, I didn't think it was, because we kept getting close to this date, and yet the fight wasn't being made. And this isn't just some preliminary fight. This is a fight that could be a title eliminator, or at least close to. And you just don't make a fight like that in 3-4 weeks. Like you need anticipation with that. So I at some point didn't think the fight was going to be made, and eventually it did. And I understand completely if there was some hesitancy or some resistance from Sean Brady, because you go on to submit the guy that was just the champion, and now they're going to feed you an undefeated 18-0 prospect coming up, 26-year-old that doesn't have the same reverence or accolades as other fighters that you should be fighting at this point, obviously with Brady being ranked number 2, but yet he might be just as equally or even more dangerous. Man, it is a very, very tough spot where he's risking a ton to gain, honestly, not a ton as well. So my respect for Sean Brady. Again, fighters fight, but we'll see if this ballsy decision ends up biting him in the ass.
Yeah, he's a minus 145 favorite, according to that MGM. But I see the path to victory for sure. Like when Sean Brady does what Sean Brady does, like he's strong. He's kind of undersized in a lot of his fights. Like Belal might have been one of the few fights where he wasn't at such a massive height disadvantage or whatnot. But he's a strong guy and a phenomenal grappler and a submission threat and a finisher. Michael Morales on the other side of the coin, a very dangerous striker. He's got a lot of size. People point to Sean Brady's loss to Belal and how the pressure seemed to have gotten to him, and Belal was able to take him out. I'd like to think that would be Michael Morales' game plan, is to pressure him and put him against the cage and just try to find the shots and take him out. But for me personally, just because of how good and game Sean Brady usually is, I can't kind of pick against him. I understand how dangerous Michael Morales is. I'm not going to be entirely shocked if he lands a shot and takes him out, but I just think based off of Brady's resume, the caliber of competition, and just how game he is, I'm going to go with him. Submission, let's see what the individual odds for that is. Brady by submission is at plus 375 and decision plus 175. I think Brady decision. What do you think?
I think, well, my official pick is Morales. I think what you're saying is completely rational, and I can totally see why you get to that. And look, I mean, that's the most likely outcome according to the odds makers. And I think odds wise, the odds makers got this one perfectly, right? Like 100% Sean Brady should be a favorite, but nowhere in the 200s. It should be like 1 something versus plus 1 something, because clearly Michael Morales is a force to be reckoned with. I'm actually going to go with Michael Morales here. Again, I agree with the odds, but maybe I'm sort of too close to the fire, too in the bubble. Obviously, through my work here at MMA Junkie and at Hablemos MMA, I focus a lot on the Hispanic and Latin American talent. And I've interviewed Michael Morales already for some time. Same thing with his coach. And, from everything that I hear, not even from him and his coach, but from people around him as well, and stuff off record as well, that, you kind of ask, hey, how's this guy looking? He's the real deal. Like, this guy hasn't even been able to show his full potential, not even close inside of the cage. People forget, but this guy did like Olympic wrestling, like freestyle wrestling for Ecuador, and his mom is a judo black belt, and he really all his life he's been a grappler. But then he moves to Tijuana to train at Entram, and Raul Arbizu was like, okay, I don't got to worry about your grappling. We got to get your hands ready, and all they do is box. But still, to this day, his superior skill is the grappling. He just hasn't been able to show it in the fights because there hasn't been need to. And there's also been a purposeful and intentional move for him to box in his fights in order to get comfortable. In one of the interviews I did maybe a few years ago, I kind of asked him, like, who you remind me of? Or I told him Anthony Johnson. I think he's like a 2.0 Anthony Johnson in the sense that he's far more skilled, but sort of the framework is still there. This massive guy with crazy power, very good wrestling, but uses it in order to knock people out. Man, I think Sean Brady's going to have a tough time taking him down. I do think Michael Morales is the best athlete right now at 170 pounds. And call me crazy, but I think Michael Morales can finish Sean Brady and get the knockout win. So That's going to be my pick. But look, if you tell me Sean Brady by decision, totally get it why, and I think it's very possible. And we'll see what happens in a few hours.
I'm exactly like you, but on the other side, like I'm going Brady decision, but it's not like a super confident pick, and I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Morales took him out. But yeah, man, crazy risky fight for him, because when you look at the landscape at 170 and the other matchups, the one I'm going to talk about now, that's also on tonight, Leon Edwards and Carlos Prates, and then we've got Bilal and Ian Gary next week in Qatar. So I just don't feel like a Brady win is going to give him the title shot. I think Kamaru Usman is probably going to leapfrog all these guys. Maybe the one guy, maybe the two I would say that have the highest chance based off of their performances would be Carlos Prates and Ian Machado Gary. I think those two have high. Shevchenko, I don't know if they're going to go with him coming off of this big injury layoff, but I just don't see, no matter what Brady does, unfortunately, the fact that they put this fight together and they didn't do Brady and Ian Machado Gary, and they didn't do Brady and Bilal, or Brady and Prates, that kind of tells me where he is in this conversation, unfortunately, because I feel like he deserved a lot of credit after that win over Leon. But Leon is going to fight Carlos Prates. Prates, obviously super popular, entertaining style. He rebounded from his loss to Ian Machado Gary in spectacular fashion against Jeff Neal. I mean, this guy, his finishes have been pretty damn spectacular, and he takes on a guy who's on a losing skid, who's been dominated. Dominated against Brady, dominated in some parts against Bilal. Obviously, he had a good final round. But, man, where do you feel like Leon's mental is at? He is fighting a striker, which is good for him. But where do you feel like, put the outcome aside, do you feel like we're going to get a good performance from Leon Edwards, win or lose?
I don't know. How often do we get a good performance from Leon, right? To be honest, it always, he's such a frustrating fighter to watch, because we've seen we've seen him at his best, and he's damn good, right? Like, we've seen that fight against Kamaru, the rematch. He looked amazing. And we've seen some fights where you go, holy shit, like, this guy's like one of the world's best. This guy's a championship level fighter. And obviously he ended up becoming the champion. So that was proven. But throughout that, we also see some performances. Like, remember that Colby Covington title defense? Like, yeah, he won, but dude, he could have pieced them up way worse. And it almost feels like he's got, like how cars have a governor and they don't let you go up. The car is capable of going past a certain speed, but there's a technology in place for you to go over 120 miles per hour, because obviously, like, where the hell will you be driving that fast, at least here in the US? So it almost feels that way, like he almost caps himself, and it is very, very frustrating to watch. And you see him get frustrating during his fights, and it's like, dude, you gotta do something. You gotta change that. You cannot feel sorry for yourself. You can't let yourself down. Do that after the fight, but in the fight, try your best. Go at it, and that seems that's not the case most of the time, win or lose. So for his sake, like, he's got to win this one. 34 years old, 2-fight losing streak. A third one would definitely put him out of title contention, and at 34 years old, trying to get back into that with the Shark Tank that is 170 pounds. Good luck. So this is a must-win situation for Leon Edwards. Yeah, he's got a tough fight in hand, somebody that will fight no matter what, like, will put his best foot forward at all times. So we're very opposite in sort of that mind state between the two. We'll see. My guess is no, because I'm picking Carlos Prates to win. But I'll say this: Carlos Prates' best versus Leon Edwards' best, I'm picking Leon Edwards. The problem is that how often do we get the very best from him? I don't think very often. So that's why I'm going with Carlos Prates in this fight.
That's pretty much how I see it as well. I feel like there's a route to victory for Leon if he mixes in the grappling. Obviously, he's going to look at the Ian Machado Gary fight, because Ian Machado Gary is not exactly an elite NCAA level wrestler. So if he was able to do that to Carlos Prates minus the late surge, I think there's a route to victory. And we've seen Leon lean on his grappling a lot of times in fights. He's also a very good striker. But yeah, it's all going to depend on if he's loose in there, if he's confident, he has to know that he's got a ton to lose. You don't want to lose for a third time. And most likely, if you're going to lose to Carlos Prates, you're probably going to get stopped as well. It's not going to be some close decision, I don't think. So definitely a ton of pressure on Leon, probably one of the most on the entire card. He is an underdog as well. I picked Prates just because of the same exact reason that you just said. I have no idea what version we're going to get of him. Yes, he's fighting a striker finally after the plethora of grapplers that he's fought, but still, momentum-wise, it's just way more on Carlos Prates' side, confidence, all that stuff. So I'm going Prates as well. Let's quickly highlight the main card opener, Beneil Dariush and Benoit Saint-Denis. Dariush misses weight. Do you think that, first off, what was your pick? And do you think Dariush missing weight changes anything?
My pick, man, I was dabbling between these two for several days. I forgot what it ended up being on the staff picks. It might have been BSD, but then I switched to Beneil. At least today, closing out this preview and going into the card is going to be Beneil. The weight miss does worry me a little bit in terms of, like, you know, where he's at, because that's very abnormal, right? Like, he really usually doesn't have troubles on the scale, but he did this time around. What does that mean? But I do think that Beneil has achieved way more than Benoit Saint-Denis in his career. I mean, he almost got to a title fight. BSD hasn't been able to get to that level yet. So I do think the higher or the better quality, the superior fighter here is Benny. However, the age, the mileage, the chin, the weight miss, all that worries me. But my official pick is the underdog here. I'm going with Dariush to win.
Same. I think Dariush is so good. I think he's one of the best grapplers in the entire
really
UFC. Yeah, he is so underrated. Like, that performance against Matteo Scamro was so good. Like, he's got so much potential. Maybe potential is not the right word to use when he's like, 34 now, and stuff. His chin is what worries me. And I swear, like, I was looking at that.
I think
36. Yeah, I was looking at that Moicano fight, and I was just thinking, there's no way in hell I would have expected Moicano to drop him. Like, and that's no disrespect to Moicano. And BSD can crack. Like, I know he maybe isn't necessarily a one-punch knockout type of guy, but that is what worries me. But I think in turn, like, Beneil is, you know, I feel like he's a better grappler than BSD, and he can win the fight there.
He's a better striker.
He's a better striker as well. Yeah, but I worry about his chin. It's exactly that.
Yeah.
I could see a scenario where, similar to the Moicano fight, where maybe he gets cracked, hurt, dropped, and rallies to win. But I like the underdog money in Beneil. I think he's so good, and I know he's up there in age, and I like his. He's one of those guys that will fight anyone as well, similar to Sean Brady, and sometimes that can cost you just because your willingness to take on anybody. But hey, he's an underdog here, and I love Benoit. I think Benoit is great as well, but I think Beneil is so good, and I think he's really, in my opinion, one of the best grapplers in the entire UFC. So very interested to see that. Let's highlight a couple more before we round out. Bo Nickel, demoted. Well, prelims, the main card, then demoted back to the prelims. How much pressure do you think is on him?
Well, I think now that he's not on the main card, a bit less pressure, but certainly a high stakes spot, because he got fraud check, and I throw the air quotes out there because I don't think that's the case. You know, fraud check is, I think it's should mean a very different thing. But the dude did lose against RDR, and, you know, there's no doubt that, like Sage Northcutt, like Sean O'Malley, like other fighters in the past, he's been given a hand by the UFC. He's been helped by good matchmaking, by good card placement, and rightfully so. The guy's a superstar in the wrestling world, and if you can cross over that fandom, you know, you have a solid name. But, you know, sometimes when people get favoritism, even though it's not Bo Nickel's fault at all, again, you know, fans don't like that. I've noticed, at least the hardcore ones, they kind of get something against you. They kind of want to see you kind of grind and earn it in a way. And that hasn't necessarily been the case for Bo. So a lot of pressure, not so much from the company. I don't think the UFC will cut him. I don't think the UFC will think of him less of anything. He's a kid. He's young. He's like, 26? He's got still a ton to develop and progress. He's got a lot of career ahead of him. But in terms of, like, the fan base, man, if he wants to sort of turn over the fan perspective, he's got to win tonight, and he's in a tough spot, I think, to win. I actually think Vieira's going to take this fight, believe it or not.
Well, Bo's actually 29, but still relatively young. Yeah, but still relatively young. But yeah. I get what you mean. He is a favorite. I'm pretty sure he's a favorite. Let me check the odds here. He's a minus 235 favorite. I think there's definitely less pressure in the sense of everyone's sold their role in terms of putting him as a future champion and whatnot. I think most people have given up on that, but definitely pressure to win. His performances have not looked impressive overall in the UFC, especially the most recent fights. So regardless, I think just a win is enough. I feel like there's less pressure in terms of the actual performance, just because we've seen some mediocre performances, even in some wins. I think a win is enough for him. I think the whole championship contender thing people have forgotten about that. On the flip side, if he goes out there and finishes Rodolfo Vieira, I think people are going to start putting him, maybe not in the championship thing, but I think they're going to get back on the hype train. But I think for now, a win is enough. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Because the fan base has certainly made it clear that they don't like Bo Nick, or at least they like to hate on him. Maybe they do like him deep down inside, but at least they're very vocal about their sort of hate.
Yeah. All right. We're going to wrap up now. But quickly, give me your bonus winners today.
Oof. Let's go Islam, Praches, and
Morales.
Sure, Morales.
Yeah, I mean, if you think he's going to finish Sean Brady, that's sure going to be Florence bonus worthy. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys tuning in. The fights are supposed to start right now. We've got Mike Bond and Kenny Hathaway on site. Danny, you're on play-by-play, correct? Mm-hmm. And we've got the whole team covering you. And don't forget to join Georgian Goes on the watch along at 8 p.m. Eastern. Jump on the link and have some fun watching and commenting on the fights. Appreciate you guys joining and enjoy the fights.